It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight, live in Nottingham, with a special programme on the damning report into this city's maternity services. More than 500 mums and babies died or suffered potentially avoidable harm because of systemic failures at a toxic hospital trust.
The women, babies and families at the centre of these pages deserve, at the very least, the truth.
Donna Ockenden spoke to more than 2,500 families and 800 members of staff for the largest maternity inquiry in the history of the NHS. And for the families involved, today's report is the culmination of a 10-year fight for the truth.
It's just, I just have this immense sense of anger, because if they'd listened to us in 2016, there would be so many people not in this room.
In Parliament today, an apology from the new Health Secretary and a commitment to bring about change. But his plan was swiftly condemned by the chair of this inquiry.
I want to use the National Maternity and Neonatal Task Force, which I chair, to create a comprehensive action plan to be published by the end of this year.
How much more harm may occur to families in Nottingham and outside Nottingham, across England, if we wait 6 months?
Well, what a day here in Nottingham. It was the biggest maternity inquiry in the history of the National Health Service. And it has confirmed what hundreds of families have long suspected, that mums and babies suffered potentially avoidable harm and even died because of systemic failures at Nottingham University Hospital's NHS Trust. Led by senior midwife Donna Ockenden, the inquiry found that bosses knew there were serious issues in maternity care going back years, but failed to take action. Women and families were not listened to, and a toxic workplace culture prevented staff from speaking out. Responding to the inquiry's findings today, the Health Secretary promised to publish an action plan, but not until the end of this year. And that is a timeframe that Donna Ockenden told me she just can't accept. We'll hear that interview with Donna in just a moment. And I'll speak to some of the parents whose experiences make up this report, as well as the government's maternity advisor, who herself suffered a traumatic birth here in Nottingham. Our first report tonight comes from our Midlands correspondent, Siobhan Freeman-Powell, who has the story of this momentous day.
What happened here in Nottingham cannot be allowed to remain in the shadows. And because the women, babies and families at the centre of these pages deserve, at the very least, the truth.
Carrying years of painful testimony, senior midwife Donna Ockenden met families at the heart of the largest maternity review in NHS history, revealing findings of failure.
This report is about what happens when leadership fails, when governance fails, when a culture develops in which bullying is tolerated.
Staff attempting to raise serious concerns were also ignored.
Hundreds of staff in Nottingham told my team what it felt like from the inside. They described a culture in which raising concerns was discouraged.
For families, this report is a confirmation of what they already knew. They have been failed and they deserved better. Felicity Bain's bladder was accidentally removed after she suffered complications in her pregnancy.
I mean, this affects me every single day, so I have to deal with the bag every day. I have to empty it, I have to change it. It's a physical reminder of what they did to me that I can't escape from.
Gary Winter and his wife Sarah's daughter died 23 minutes after being born in 2019. The hospital was later prosecuted by the CQC and fined £800,000 for failures in their care.
They have failed to keep our families safe, and they will continue to put families in harm's way until they are made to stand up and account for their failure to recognise a maternity scandal after maternity scandal.
promises that lessons will be learned have been repeated, but political upheaval has seen 4 different health secretaries in the 4 years since this review was launched. So families now have their answers, but may still question who to hold accountable.
I just have this immense sense of anger because if they'd listened to us in 2016, there would be so many people not in this room. I just can't compute, as a senior clinician, how they did this to us and how they did this to all these families.
I want to use the National Maternity and Neonatal Task Force, which I chair, to create a comprehensive action plan to be published by the end of this year.
Sky News data and forensics analysis has found that last year, Nottingham University hospitals had the 2nd highest rate of perineal tears and the 8th highest rate of postpartum hemorrhages.
I'd like to say a sincere, unreserved sorry to them. The families are understandably focused on accountability, and sometimes I don't think we've met their aspirations.
This report reveals what happens when leadership, governments and culture fail. But the legacy cannot be measured by the words written on these pages. It's about what happens next, because the real test of safe maternity care isn't just about the lives brought into the world, it's also about tragedy it prevents. And perhaps the most powerful moment today wasn't a speech or a statistic, it was the silence. A room full of families remembering the babies and mothers at the heart of this review. Siobhan Freeman-Powell, Sky News, Nottingham.
Well, as Donna Ockenden said, without the families, none of this would be known. I'm joined now by 7 parents whose stories formed part of Donna Ockenden's inquiry. Molly Sutton, who endured a traumatic birth in Nottingham and believes failings by the Trust may have led to her son's Rupert disabilities. Alongside Molly, Avias and Yvonne, also here tonight. Their daughter, Naledi, was born via a C-section in 2023 and Yvonne wasn't given proper anaesthetic. Also here tonight, Kim Errington, her son Teddy, dying when he was just a day old. An inquest finding that there were undoubtedly failings by the Trust. Daryl and Emily's daughter, Caitlin, was left with severe injuries after her birth at Nottingham City Hospital. And also here tonight, Mel Ibrahim, her daughter Amia, born at 24 weeks. She sustained severe brain damage and spent 8 months in hospital. Thank you so much for agreeing to be part of our special programme tonight on what is a huge day for you. And again, to pay tribute to you and the wider families, as Donna Ockenden said, it's you that got us here. You didn't want to be campaigners, you're victims in this, but you're the ones that have got us here today. Kim, I'll come to you first. You were part of that press conference today. Your thoughts about what Donna Ockenden laid bare for everyone to see?
I think she didn't hold back any punches in delivering her findings and her thoughts on the conduct of the hospital. It's difficult to see those statistics, which aren't just statistics. There's families behind every single number. It's really difficult, even having been in it for this long, to see all of that laid bare, but very necessary to see it.
Emily, I caught your eye during Siobhan's report and we both had to look away because that was difficult to watch. And your story, yours and Daryl's story, represented in amongst all of this. This was set up as a pivotal moment in maternity care. You know, Nottinghamshire, rock bottom in terms of what happens to families and babies. What do you want to happen from this point on?
Things to be different, bottom line. Mothers, fathers to be listened to, have their concerns taken seriously, escalated. When things go wrong, that to be acknowledged, admitted, investigated, and there to be a candour honesty, engagements.
I think that's what has come out in the process of this, the lack of honesty and accountability, which is, I know, something that's so important to all of you. Mel, we heard criticism there from Donna Ockenden, as Kim alluded to, not pulling any punches today. She responded immediately to the Health Secretary and he said, I'll have an action plan in 6 months. She said, I don't think so. This is something that should have been done years ago. Your reaction to what the Health Secretary had to say?
Immediately it was, well, 6 months is not an immediate action. And I think the term recommendations was used quite a lot within Parliament, and they are not recommendations. They are actions that Donna is saying need to happen immediately to ensure that maternity services become safe.
Yeah. Molly, Donna Ockenden said mums and babies should be guaranteed safe and equitable care. The question is, when will that happen? And of course, this report delivered against a backdrop of political turmoil. The Health Secretary may not well be in post in a few weeks' time. You've had 7 health secretaries throughout the course of this inquiry. Is that a frustration today?
Absolutely. I think a lot of us as well didn't see continuous care as well, and to not have continuous government either. It's having to once again repeat our experiences to new people, and we're tired of it. Yeah. We're exhausted, and like Mel said, these are immediate actions. They need to be happening now. As soon as Donna said them, they should be implemented. But 6 months is not good enough.
Yvonne, Donna Ockenden always pulls up people when they talk about recommendations. She said these are not recommendations because the implication is you can take them or leave them. These are necessary, urgent, essential action. Do you fear for time being wasted? What is your message to those in power to make a change? These recommendations, urgent, necessary, essential recommendations, points of action, have been around for years. What we've heard today isn't new in that sense.
Absolutely, and for me, I feel like it's time that someone in Parliament steps up and takes action. Because once it goes on we're waiting for 6 months. When will that happen? We're not sure if the Health Secretary will still be in post at that time. And we just don't want it to be another backlog, things that are just put in a backlog, sat, because families have been through a lot to get to this point after so many number of years. It hasn't been an easy journey for families, and even the people that have been supporting us, yourselves reporters, and even our immediate families as well, they've been through the journey with us. So them saying that these are recommendations, they're not. They're actions that need to be taken immediately, and it's very urgent. Within what's come out of the report today from Donna Ockenden, you can tell it's not just the numbers are horrific. The stories experienced not only by mothers, but also the midwives that are working under toxic environments. Action has to be taken.
Yeah, when you say enough is enough, you mean it, and action should start today. We're going to talk more throughout the course of the hour. I talked there about the Health Secretary, James Murray, saying that he'll put forward that action plan by the end of this year. But, as I was just discussing with the families here, that timeframe not acceptable to neither them nor the report's author, Donna Ockenden, who says that the government needs to act immediately on this crisis. I sat down with Donna a little earlier.
Since the Health Secretary got to his feet and made that declaration, I've already been contacted by midwives, obstetricians and neonatologists across the country, and had lots of families message me. And the question they've asked me is, the midwives and obstetricians, how many more midwives are going to say, we can't do this anymore? How many more obstetricians are going to say, I'm finished with obstetrics? We haven't got 6 months. How much harm, if we continue in the way we are continuing, how much more harm may occur to families in Nottingham and outside Nottingham, across England, if we wait 6 months for an action plan to be developed? That's not 6 months for them to be implemented. I don't think that's what they were saying. 6 months for an action plan to be developed. I'm just going to say to you that I'm going to invite the government to reconsider their position, because it is my duty to do that.
The Health Secretary didn't call them urgent and immediate actions, he called them recommendations, and you don't like that term because it implies you can take them or leave them. And I think that speaks to what you're saying about what the Health Secretary said today. The urgency isn't being understood. Lots of great words and big promises, but you've been here too many times before.
Absolutely. They are immediate and essential actions for a reason. We've had huge cooperation from Royal Colleges, professional organisations, to make sure that what we said in the report, based on our findings in Nottingham, 2,511 families, 838 members of staff, could be then distilled into 8 key areas of work. They are immediate and essential actions. They're not a pick and mix recommendations that we can take 6 months to even develop an action plan for.
Before you delivered your report today, this, along with the National Inquiry, the report which will be delivered by Baroness Amos in the coming days, this was seen as a pivotal point, a watershed moment in maternity care. Are you concerned that, given what you heard from the Health Secretary, that this could be an opportunity wasted?
Well, I mean, 6 months to develop an action plan, it sounds to me more like a dripping tap than a watershed moment. So let's just see what comes out in the coming days. I don't think that this is the urgency, that safe perinatal care, that families who may be using maternity services over the coming weeks and coming months, that midwives, obstetricians, obstetric anaesthetists and so on, going into work every day, giving of their best, in sometimes the most incredibly difficult circumstances. I hear that every day from colleagues on the ground. I don't think that this lack of urgency is what all of that group of people deserve.
Yeah, because the fact of the matter is it's staff and mums and babies affected, and you know, and fathers. The ripple effect is huge. It's life-changing for so many. And as we sit here right now, nearly 50% of maternity units in the country are inadequate, unsafe, some dangerously so. We've been hearing from the families today at the heart of this, along with the NHS staff that you spoke to and have been affected. You've got to know them really well over the course of the last few years. And the families are saying that nothing short of a statutory public inquiry will do. The Health Secretary today said nothing is off the table. Do you agree with the families? Is that the point we have reached now, where this has to be the next step?
So I understand completely where the families are coming from. We have seen throughout this review excellent engagement from local families, from staff on the ground, but very, very disappointing levels of engagement from pretty recent executive colleagues.
They just didn't want to talk to you, Donna. You asked them and they refused your request.
They were recent former members of staff that I know got 3 letters from the current chief executive of the trust asking them to come forward.
And just ignored you?
They ignored him. They ignored him and therefore didn't contact us. And then there were another smaller number who did eventually get in contact with us, but then missed any reasonable deadline for arranging an interview. So when you put all that together, I am pleased that there's going to be a new law, as I understand it, from Parliament, which will compel colleagues and former colleagues to speak to, for example, the Sussex and Leeds reviews. But I do see where the families are coming from and the deep level of frustration they will be sensing now in Nottingham.
Yeah, because in their eyes, the truth will never be uncovered unless those who hold the responsibility for failings give the unfettered truth, open the doors, hand over the access to what was known. And given what we've seen in your report, not just unsafe care, but cover-ups and lies.
Absolutely. So what we saw in Nottingham was very similar in one aspect to that which we saw in Shrewsbury and Telford. So we saw, instead of using the then established serious incident framework, Nottingham invented its own system, higher level incidents. Now, the consequence of that meant that what should have been serious incidents weren't declared externally, meant that the trust was less likely to be subject to scrutiny. And of course, we saw a very similar methodology in Shrewsbury.
Essentially marking their own homework.
Absolutely, and avoiding others from seeing the results of the marking of that homework. So, and then of course in Nottingham, very different from Shrewsbury, because it didn't come to our attention, was the appalling standard of after-death treatment. I won't call it after-death care, after-death treatment of some of the deceased. And this came to us because families already within the review raised concerns. It was never I never intended to look at that. And that has been, in terms of a systemic issue that we've uncovered, and more evidence has come to light, that's been one of the most shocking things I've ever found in the whole of my career.
That's to do with mortuary care, again, at the same trust here in Nottingham. And again, that is one of your concerns about an action plan falling within the remit of the National Maternity Task Force, because it tightens the parameters of what will be looked at. Mortuary care won't be looked at by a task force specialising in maternity care.
Well, it's unlikely to be, and it would be very difficult to get the experts around the table. I don't believe that they are members of that task force. So what I would say as regards mortuary care, after death care and treatment, is there needs to be an urgent governance review. Urgent, not the end of the year, not in 6 months, an urgent review of governance standards across mortuaries in this country, so that we can assure ourselves, or perhaps not assure ourselves, that the same things that the brave families of Nottingham brought to our attention are not happening elsewhere.
Donna, it's been said many times today, we've been here before, you've been here before. You're next overseeing inquiries in Leeds and in Sussex, so unfortunately we will be here again. How do we break this cycle? What is your message to government, to the NHS, and to regulators today?
So government and the NHS, we gave a very clear roadmap for maternity safety in March 2022, following the publication of the Shrewsbury and Telford report. Sadly, most of that remains in the report, on the shelf, gathering dust. That is simply something that we cannot tolerate. Yet again today, we have set out immediate and essential actions, not recommendations, that once again will give a roadmap for safety that is supported by royal colleges, professional associations across all of the perinatal professions. I think the time for talking and reflection and thinking about it is long gone. We've got to get on now and fix the issues.
Enough talk, action is what is urgently needed. Let's bring back in some of our parents this evening. I'm joined again by Daryl and Emily, and Kim and Molly. Emily, following this report, a lot will be talked about, and one of the key things that will be talked about is the unnecessary deaths of mothers and babies. But what should also be talked about is the serious harms, because they are life-changing, lifelong consequences of unsafe maternity care. Your family, you and Daryl and your wider family, are dealing with that with Caitlin. Can you give us an insight into the effect that it's had on you?
I think the best example of the effect that it's had on us is when we were talking earlier and we told you Caitlin's in intensive care as we speak. And we just say that sentence so flippantly. That's not a once-in-a-lifetime horrific event to us. That's a Wednesday. And that's become so normalised to us. Caitlin's injury, she'll never walk, she'll never talk, she can't hold her head up, she's partially sighted, she'll never live an independent life, and she's not expected to survive childhood. The ripple effect that's had on everyone, from parents to grandparents, the cost to society that Caitlin's injuries had, the loss of her potential, the loss of our potential.
Daryl, I'll bring you in there because something Donna Ockenden really wanted to highlight is what she called the secondary victims, the partners, the grandparents, the wider circle of family and friends, the ripple effect of what happened in this county to thousands of families you live with every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. The number of 500 was given of the women and children directly harmed or killed, but then there are thousands of others that just live with that trauma on a day-to-day basis, whether that's grieving lost children, lost wives, or, in our case, living every day with a disabled child that should have had a normal, healthy life. And every day is just a reminder that no matter what a report says, she's not going to get that back.
And Emily, it's worth pointing out that you were a midwife at NUH. And what has been reflected as well is that the people that live in these communities in and around the area of Nottinghamshire have no choice but to use that trust, knowing that it is inadequate, dangerously unsafe. You yourself have to take your daughter, who was harmed in that hospital, back there for care. I can't even begin to imagine how traumatic that is for you.
No, it's tricky, isn't it?
There are areas of the hospital you just don't want to walk through because it brings back such painful memories.
It's a big hospital, and we've planned routes out so that we don't have to walk past labour suite, past neonatal units, don't have to use those lifts that
past members of staff that still work there.
Yes. And down to that level, just the harm, it permeates every aspect of our lives.
Kim, there is so much to talk about, but I do want to talk about what happens next. And Families Today made that official call for a public statutory inquiry, which has powers, which will compel people to give evidence, from regulators to NHS bosses, those who so far have remained silent or not given the inquiry, or indeed the families, because many still looking for definitive answers as to why their care failed. That is why you're calling for a public inquiry. It really matters, doesn't it, that is part of the next steps, and the Health Secretary said nothing's off the table.
It hugely matters. His predecessor, Wes, also told us, public inquiry is not off the table. That since Wes said that and James is in place, how many babies have died in Nottingham, in the country? Publishing today, like you said, it's been a 10-year fight. For me, it's been 5.5 years, and I started campaigning almost as soon as Teddy died because I knew something was wrong. And another 6 months means another 6 months of exhaustion, another 6 months taking my energy and attention away from my living daughter, because they're the ones who also make a sacrifice.
And potentially more harms to other families.
So much.
We could have a new Prime Minister in a matter of weeks. Andy Burnham is waiting in the wings. What would you say to him if he were to come in and take a look at what has been published today? What would you say to the new Prime Minister?
Public inquiry now. How can you look at the findings and not do that? Any delay is another insult to the families who have suffered tremendously, and you are putting more lives in danger.
Molly, part of the problem here, speaking to many of the families, is that talking about birth trauma, children with disabilities, baby death, is taboo. We don't talk about it enough. And do you feel like if we did talk about it more, if families like you were brave enough to come out and say what was really going on in their care, that we'd have got here sooner?
Yeah, I understand why people don't want to talk about it. It is the most horrific thing that could ever happen to a single person. It's debilitating at times. Just closing your eyes can take you back to that very moment. And if we all spoke up a little bit more about it, even if we spoke to our friends, our families a little bit more, just get the conversation going. There is support out there, there are friends out there that you never knew you'll ever meet, but they become like family. We're all here for each other. I don't really know anybody who hasn't had some form of trauma, and birth in itself is a traumatic thing. It's very painful, it can go wrong. Even when it goes right, it still hurts. So it's always needs to be spoken about, and it needs to be spoken about louder.
And you do this for Rupert, right?
I do this for Rupert, and for Caitlin, Winter, Teddy, Harriet. There's 2,500 families. Approximately behind each one of us is 175 families that stand behind us, and we do it for them.
Well, Molly, Kim, Darryl and Emily, thank you so much. I know you're going to stay with us for the rest of the special programme, reflecting on this momentous day, not just for you, but for so many families in this county and beyond when it comes to maternity care in this country. Now, just last month, the government appointed Michelle Welsh as the country's first maternity advisor, promising to deliver lasting improvements to maternity care. The MP knows firsthand what it's like to have a traumatic birth in Nottingham, and she has campaigned for an end to maternity failings. And I'm pleased to say that she joins us now on the programme. And Michelle, thank you so much. A huge day for you professionally and personally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've been through absolutely every emotion today. I did think that actually once the report was published, I'd feel a sense of relief, but actually that relief isn't there. Actually, what I feel is that determination to actually make those changes and be the voices for those families has never been greater for me personally.
Well, Michelle, when you stood up in the Commons today to give your response to the Health Secretary comments, you got a huge round of applause from the audience, the families in Nottingham who were watching you got a huge round of applause. But when the Health Secretary stood up to give his response, slightly less of a warmer welcome, because he said there is an action plan coming, but not until the end of the year. And you'll have heard Donna Ockenden and the family's response to that throughout the course of the day. Why is it not happening now? It is already long overdue.
Well, I think we can all agree that actually action in maternity services is way, way long overdue. I had a meeting with the Secretary of State last night, and I was very clear with him that we have to see immediate actions. He has agreed to go meet with NUH officials next week, so that relates directly to some of those things that need to happen immediately in Nottingham. It is also my understanding that it won't be 6 months for action. We will be developing a plan, but actions will be taking place as we go along as well. Those are the reassurances that I have received, and I'll be holding him to account on that.
So he said 6 months publicly, but to you, he said actually it's going to happen quicker.
There will be actions taking place as we move forward. A plan will be developed within 6 months, but there are things that require immediate action now, such as things that he talked about with regards to GMC and the regulators, action with regards to some direct actions that have to take place in Nottingham University Hospital Trust as an absolute urgency, and other things I think that later will come out in the next few days.
Michelle, today Donna Ockenden spoke about NHS failings, management, bosses at the NHS. She's also, spoken about the Health Secretary and what needs to be done at government level. But she also looked at regulators, those charged with oversight, governance of maternity services. And she said they are not fit for purpose, out of the remit of her inquiry, out of the remit of the national inquiry, the report of which will be delivered in the coming days. Do regulators need to be examined, properly tested and held to account as well? Because they have failed here, clearly.
Absolutely, and it's one of the things I actually feel extremely strong about. Some people will find this uncomfortable, but actually the truth is it was not a regulator, it was not a law, it was not the government, it was not NHS England that brought this inquiry about. It was families having to stand up over and over again and tell people the most horrendous experience that they have ever been through in the whole of their life. Harm, their precious babies dying for no reason whatsoever. Having to keep saying that is cruel. That is absolutely cruel. Where were the regulators? Where were the processors? Where were those organisations that are supposed to protect us within our health service? And this didn't happen over a week or a month. This was a decade, over a decade of harm. Yes, they need to be examined. Yes, they need to be hauled in within the department. And yes, serious questions need to be raised.
Michelle, I can sense your anger. I know you get it. You have been through this. You have been in these families' shoes. But what does accountability look like? Because I've spoken to so many families today who say management and even staff on the maternity wards who were, as you put it, and as Donna Ockenden put it, cruel in their care, cruel in their attitude. They still have their jobs. And in any other walk of life, Sarah Hawkins, you know her well, one of the lead campaigners in this, doing this for her daughter Harriet along with her husband Jack, said that in any other setting, if a mum and baby was harmed, there would be urgent action and serious consequences. How is this any different?
It isn't any different. It isn't any different at all, and that's where the frustration and the anger comes with regards to these regulators. The GMC, for example, was told years ago about some of these people and what was happening. In 2021, I sat in front of some of the lead people in Nottingham University Hospitals Trust that were making the big decisions on maternity. They evaded questions, they weren't bothered, they clearly weren't interested in delivering the maternity services that were safe, and yet these people continued in those posts for years and years and years. People reported to the regulators, but nothing happened. How can that be? That has to stop. We will not see improvement in maternity services until we have a level of accountability that actually means good midwives can be great midwives, good obstetricians can be great obstetricians, but if you're not delivering safe, compassionate services, then there will be a consequence.
Yeah, I mean, Michelle, you know this as well as the families here tonight know this. We've been here before in terms of talking about accountability. People must be accountable, but we've had so many inquiries, reports and recommendations, and, you know, yet here we are again. The families have said enough is enough. Nothing is happening. So what we need is a statutory public inquiry. Do you agree with them?
That was part of my conversation last night with the Secretary of State. I made a very personal decision last night, kept me wide awake for many hours, that actually I wanted today and remain wanting today to be about the families and Donna Ockenden and the inquiry in Nottingham. I did speak to the Secretary of State last night. I believe there are huge gaps that need covering, and so I believe that if the families are calling for that, if there are that huge gaps, then I think the Secretary of State needs to come round the table with those families and have that very serious conversation of what that would look like and how it be delivered. Because there are some practicalities around this. There is a police operation that is taking place at the moment, and I had a meeting with Nottinghamshire Police only this week, who were quite clear that they didn't want another situation where the police investigation was halted because there was a public inquiry. Is there a way to do it together? There's some very, very serious conversations to be had around this, and so that is what I think should happen next. But I want to be really, really clear. Myself and all of the Nottinghamshire MPs were very united today, and what we clearly said that we want justice for those families and we want accountability, and we don't want families in Nottinghamshire to go through what others. So we will do and we will say what is ever necessary to get those answers and to get that justice.
Michelle Welsh, thank you so much for your time. As the Health Secretary said, when it comes to a public statutory inquiry, nothing is off the table. But who knows, we may well have a new Health Secretary and a new Prime Minister in just a matter of weeks. And I know that you're on the side of the families and you'll be one of the first in their inbox. Michelle, I really appreciate your time, as ever. Thank you so much. Michelle Welsh there, the National Maternity Advisor. Well, let's bring back in some of our families this evening. Yvonne and Avias here. Their daughter Naledi was born via a C-section in 2024. Yvonne wasn't given proper anaesthetic. Mel also joining us. Her daughter Amaya, born at 24 weeks, sustaining severe brain damage, spending 8 months in hospital. And Shaman Freeman-Powell, who's been covering this issue for some time now here for Sky News, joins us as well. Thank you so much. Yvonne, I want to talk to you about what happened to you at NUH, because you went in for a C-section and weren't given proper anaesthetic. I know this is really traumatic for you to talk about, so thank you, but it just feeds into what we were talking about, the dangerously unsafe care that has been unfolding there at that trust. What was that experience like, Yvonne?
Oh, it was such a horrific experience for me, not just me alone, but also my husband, Avias. He was in there with me as well. But the fact that I wasn't listened to, and it's a repeated thing again, we're here again because I wasn't listened to. When I said I'm in pain, initially they had tested to see if it had worked. They only used a cold spray across my chest about 4 times. And I was asked, can you feel the cold spray? And I repeated 4 times, yes, I can feel the cold spray, which meant it did not work. And no one checked my lower limbs, if I could still move my legs or not. And as soon as the surgeon went and did the first incision, I screamed. I said to her, I'm in pain. And she said, no, what you're feeling is pressure. So I was made to believe what I was feeling is pressure, but I knew that it wasn't pressure, it was pain, because I'd been through this before. I had a C-section with my son, so I knew I was not supposed to feel anything, and I could still move my legs. I remember being held down by some of the staff members. I was literally restrained during the birth of my daughter. They were holding me down just to try and get her out as quick as they could. They realized I was in that much pain, but no one did anything. They had time where they could have done something before they started the C-section. They could have increased the anesthetic. The fact that I felt so much pain, I'm not even sure if it was administered properly.
Obviously, as Yvonne said, you're there for all of this. And there was at one point where you just couldn't tell them you were in pain anymore because you were...
I was just screaming in agony. I got to a point where I couldn't scream anymore. That's how much pain I was in. I was just groaning. That's all I could do. And as soon as I heard Naledi crying, I knew she was okay. And I just said to myself, okay, if I die now, it's okay. I've heard her crying. She'll be taken care of. I had to come to terms with death really quick. I had to just say to myself, okay, if it ends here, it's fine. You've heard her crying. That means she's alive.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, Avias, as I said, you're there watching your wife go through this and staff are not talking to you. You didn't even know you were going in for a C-section. That's how little communication there was. Can you talk to me about how you were treated by staff?
Yeah, when you go to maternity with your wife or your partner, you want to support them as much as you can, protect them, give them some reassurance. But when you start to see some failures, especially in communication, not being listened to, this brings fear to you. We thought Yvonne is going to be helped, probably in a bigger room. But when I got there, already the anesthesia was already doing some work on Yvonne's back. And the moment the procedure started, Yvonne screamed. And she wasn't listened to. At that point, I felt so helpless. And I think this resonates with a lot of fathers who get into theatre and they see their wives frightened, in fear and in agony, and they can't do anything. And the thought of, am I going to come out with my wife here? It crossed my mind. Yeah.
It's just the worst of the worst. Donna Ockenden talked about safe and equitable care. And in saying that, she also highlighted in the report that unsafe care disproportionately affects women from disadvantaged backgrounds and black women.
Yeah.
Did this play a part for you, do you think? Do you think you're not listened to because you're a black woman?
Of course, it does play in my mind quite a lot.
Of course.
You know, when I think about it.
The statistics are there to back up that fear.
And the report today even showed that the most families who are affected in maternity care are from black and minority ethnics. And for me, that day, I wasn't listened to, and that's one of the things that's been highlighted over the years, that most mothers that come from different cultural backgrounds are not listened to, are not heard, especially when we
inclined to complain.
Yeah.
Make a fuss as well.
Yeah, and I think that's why it was so important for me. This is bigger than my story with Naledi, my daughter. It's for every black woman, every woman of colour who's experienced such horrific treatment, who are going through trauma because of how they were not helped with maternity care. And I think it's important that we speak up, not just for ourselves, but for other women as well.
Very much so, and I know that you and Shaman have had conversations, and Shaman, you've spoken to, you know, South Asian women, black women, all with similar stories, many of whom you want to help speak publicly, but they're reluctant to.
And I understand that reluctance, SJ. I think all of the cases, experiences that we've heard, not just here in Nottingham, but across the country, show women not being listened to, having their concerns being dismissed. But if you then think that your race or your ethnic background could also play a part of it, it means that you're not welcome in that room, that your concerns are not believed purely because of what you may look like or because of your background. So then why would you then want to present yourself and speak about that if the racism and discrimination that you've experienced has already been dismissed? I thought that what Donna said in her report about the number of people from black and ethnic minority backgrounds being disadvantaged when it comes to their care, but also not being reflected when it came to presence in the room. That struck me. I'm from Nottingham. I grew up in this city. I know how diverse it is, but going to a lot of those meetings, that wasn't reflected in the room. And I do think there are some people that may be cautious about speaking about racism and discrimination in a climate where it's constantly dismissed.
Well, Donna Ockenden not shying away from that today. Mel, let's talk about Amaya, because your care during your pregnancy and the delay in care for Amaya after birth led to her having a brain injury. And these are the effects that you and your daughter will live with for the rest of your lives. I just want to ask you about how you are feeling in terms of what you've heard and the action that's being asked for next. What are your reflections?
I'm going to be an absolute advocate for a public inquiry.
Is that the only way forward now to actually bring about real change? Because we've done so much talking.
Yeah, and when you hear government say, there were members of Parliament today who have called for a public inquiry as well, because they can see really that's where we're at now. When you have people, it's already been mentioned, when you have people who are still in post, people who have not come forward when Donna has requested clinicians to come and talk with her, senior clinicians. I think it's about half of them who decided not to. How do you make them accountable? Now, we can't make them. The only way now is through the legal route, and that would be a public inquiry.
What does accountability look like for you in terms of there are management figures and staff on maternity wards still in jobs described as cruel by Donna Ockenden today in the way that they acted and provided, I use the term loosely, care.
Yeah. With Amaya, there was negligence that led to circumstances of her being born in a room. I delivered her on my own in a bathroom, and she went from birth to being put into the neonatal unit because there was no one with particular skills on the unit. I was moved from the labour suite. I was originally put on the labour suite at 23 weeks and 4 days. I was moved. I don't know who made that decision. Going through my medical records, I can see who possibly did, but I don't know why a decision was made to move me from somewhere where there was equipment, knowledge and skills for an extremely premature baby, and I was deemed a high-risk pregnancy, told Amaya is imminent. Why was I moved? What was the decision behind that? Who made that decision? And I would like that person or the people to be made accountable for that, because ultimately, when I had her on the antenatal unit, away from everyone, delivering her myself, she then had 20 minutes, as I only discovered the proper time frame by going through her medical records, that she had 20 minutes without actual full oxygen support. Now you think about this, she was 24 weeks, size of my hand. She was underdeveloped lungs, she was fighting for her life, absolutely fighting, she was hypothermic. So she may well have had brain damage for being premature, but there are things that happened, negligence, that potentially have increased. She has an extremely severe brain injury.
And the fact that you have to fight for answers, you haven't got all of the information, you may never have all of the information, is just yet another trauma for you and so many families. Mel, thank you. Thank you for your bravery and your candour this evening. Well, ahead of today's report, I actually sat down with a senior midwife who worked at the Trust and gave evidence to the Ockenden inquiry. She's still working in the National Health Service, so to protect her identity, a producer has voiced her words. She painted a very grim picture of the culture at the Trust and shared harrowing details of failures in care.
When I was offered the job at Nottingham University Hospitals, I had no idea what I would be walking into. The midwives came to me with horrific stories spanning decades. The maternity unit was unsafe, dangerously unsafe. While I was there, a baby was delivered with such force during a forceps delivery that it was delivered in one pull. You're meant to do it in stages to prevent life-changing injuries, vaginal tears and perineal muscle damage. But the baby was pulled out with such force that it fell to the floor, hitting the leg of the bed on the way down. The umbilical cord ruptured and the baby, as a consequence, had a cranial hemorrhage, bleeding on the brain. This incident wasn't recorded as moderate or severe harm in the hospital report because that would have led to an investigation. Instead, it was deliberately downgraded and recorded as no harm because they reasoned they didn't actually mean to harm the baby. I just kept thinking, this isn't right. Even if it wasn't meant, the baby was harmed in our care. This was a pattern, midwives' reports of serious incidents downgraded by management. These were not minor issues. There were cases of maternal and fetal deaths either not being investigated or being recorded as low or no harm. I could see patterns straight away, a disproportionate number of babies born with brain injuries, and women in late labour being told by staff they weren't in labour, forced to labour silently alone for hours, with no monitoring or proper care. That is when it would become dangerous for mothers and babies. The culture was toxic, collusion between managers, covering up poor care, regularly changing records to reflect what should have happened rather than what actually happened, and belittling junior members of staff. Midwives were portrayed as having learnt helplessness, which is where someone continually faces uncontrollable, stressful situations, and eventually they just stop trying. This was true in part, but really they were suffering from PTSD. The trauma of what they were part of made them numb. Some of them carrying so much pain and grief and just not being listened to. They were understaffed, under-resourced and unsupported, and as a result some staff became uncaring. They were just getting through it, because management ignored them. As for the staff who wrote FOH or off home above mothers' names on the whiteboard, everyone knows who they are. Some still work there. It's sickening and just shows the toxicity of the culture. How does a member of staff get to that point? It was so horrific. There was a churn in my stomach every day, and I would be physically sick on my journey into work. I was so anxious. I've always had good mental health, but what was going on at work had a huge effect on me that lasted for a very long time. I think about NUH and the families affected every day. I feel so much sadness, which I'll live with forever. When I saw on the news there was going to be a review, I completely fell apart. In the end, I was diagnosed with nervous exhaustion because of the trauma and stress. I will never forget my children's faces when I had my mental breakdown. I made a promise to myself I would never allow that to happen again. I was lucky enough financially that I could leave, but many can't. We don't become midwives to cause harm. We become midwives to support and advocate for women and to provide compassionate care. It's culture, systems, processes and poor leadership that have let midwives down over the last 2 decades. Senior figures should be held accountable. They all knew what was happening in their maternity units because their staff were telling them. Enough is enough.
Well, important to reflect the other side of the care. Of course, over 800 NHS staff giving evidence to the Ockenden inquiry. Emily, I just want to ask you about what we heard there, because you have been a midwife at the Trust and you have also been on the receiving end of unsafe care. Your reflections on what staff have been going through over the last decade?
We heard from over 800 staff, or the report heard from over 800 staff who showed immense courage in stepping forward to share their experiences. We've also heard that may have come at a great personal cost to them. They have absolutely suffered psychological harm as well. The Nottingham families do recognise that there are good staff in a bad system, but equally there are far too many examples of cruelty, unkind care, bullying and toxicity.
All completely reflected in Donna Ockenden's report today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being part of our special coverage. Such an important day for you all and for everyone watching as well. The Health Secretary says there will be an action plan on maternity ready by the end of the year, but let's face it, he is probably not going to be in that job in a few weeks' time. And Donna Ockenden says change cannot wait. Thank you for watching.